Welcome to the Tractor Beam on the Star Wars Underworld podcast network, your home for podcast comics reviews here on the network. Yeah, good to say that again. Haven't said that in a while. Tractor Beam, it's back. For those who don't know, first of all, I should say who I am. I'm Matthew. I'm here in the Underworld studios. I should probably write this intro down. I did that on Iron Cat. Here at the Star Wars Underworld North studios here in Toronto. For those who don't know, I did for the Ion Canon podcast, which I do with Joel Davis, did audio only comics reviews that went the way audio only podcasting kind of does, but also solo podcasting does. So I'm glad to be joined. Welcome, Chris Starrapter. Welcome to kind of soft launch here. Welcome to being a regular on a Star Wars Underworld Network podcast. First of all, second of all, welcome to the Tractor Beam.
Thank you, Matthew. I know it's a senior tie-in correspondent for the Star Wars Underworld. I guess I'm weaseling my way further and further into this wonderful group of positive Star Wars fans, which I'm all about. I think this is funny as heck because I listen to Tractor Beam every week as part of my podcast lineup.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm like, what? Like I rely on this to get all the juicy details that I don't think about myself when it comes down to the deeper kind of mythology and the story that's going on in this stuff. And I guess the only way to convince you to bring it back was to somehow be part of this show going forward. So I'm like, hey, that's one way to do it. I'm just gonna make you do it with me, I guess.
There you go. So I'll explain what that's about. I mean, solo non-appointment podcasting is hard. I don't understand how people do it. I tried and I got to 50 episodes. This is why this is number 51. So I got to about 50 weeks and like I can't. So now we're still gonna figure out when to do this specifically because this, if you don't know, here on the Star Wars Underworld podcast network and YouTube channel, the flagship podcast is usually at this time slot. The reason for why we're relaunching the Tractor Beam on YouTube and on Iron Canon Twitch, Iron Canon Twitter, Underworld Twitter, is because in part because there's also a writer strike and a screen actor strike, and we want to make sure we're advocating for a fair deal for everyone in Hollywood. Part of what we want to do, and if you go back to Monday night on the Ion Canon podcast, I talked about kind of what I'm going to do, what I want to try in this time, this strange funny time. I'm kind of taking a break for a few weeks until we're coming back on the 21st, but to try some new things and to say, okay, well, take this opportunity. Here are these stories in industries that have their issues, sure, but aren't striking, and we can talk about them. And the creatives, again, there are issues in the book industry, in the comic industry, but they also, books and comics don't always have their time in the sun. Don't get sheer numbers don't get as much attention as films and Disney Plus streaming series. So we're gonna want to shift the attention this way and say relaunch Tractor Beam, talk about comics, all that good stuff. As part of trying some new things in this time, and also to say again, we're gonna have to sort out when we actually do this. This is the soft launch. We're gonna dive in a few minutes. What I will say is how I've done the Tractor Beam, and Chris, you're great to come on board, and you've been good with coming alongside with the way I do things. Is I don't do a synopsis so much of the comics. I presume either you've read them or you don't care about being spoiled, or don't worry about not knowing what we're talking about. But I'm gonna introduce the comic and the creators and give the publisher summary from Previews World, and then just what I think and feel about this book, and we'll chat from there. If you do want to read a synopsis, or if it is more your jam first, if you haven't read these comics, welcome to the Tractor Beam. But also, we're going to spoil everything and talk about things you may not know what we're talking about. This video, it's on YouTube. It'll be on Twitch and Twitter. Not quite under Facebook. I didn't quite get that to work. But it'll be here. Go read the comics, they're fantastic, and then come back and hear what we have to say. But also, Chris, over on your channel, on the Starrapter YouTube channel, you do a synopsis, you do a recap of these books, and give a bit of your thoughts on them initially. And that comes out every Wednesday, right?
Yeah, Thursday mornings now.
Oh,
Thursday
Thursday morning.
mornings. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
fair
yeah.
enough.
Yeah, I got the comics on Wednesday, new comic book release, and I
Mhm.
talk about. They're usually under 10 minutes I can get them,
Yeah,
unless it's this week where I actually went to 12 or
sure.
13 minutes because I had so much to say about Dark Droids
Right.
and what we're going to talk about this week. But
Right.
yeah, it's I just kind of dive into a quick recap and I
Mhm.
give my big overarching kind of thoughts.
Mhm.
But it's fun because I've been talking about them in a bubble with myself for the last
Right.
going on almost 8 years now.
You've been
I
able to
mean,
do the solo thing somehow. I don't know.
I just turn the camera on. I'm like, all right, here we go. We're just
Yep.
doing this thing. And
Mhm.
so this is going to be great because out of all the people, I know you're the one that I'm going to be able to deep dive into these
Yeah.
comics because when it comes to the Star Wars hierarchy, it's like you got the movies, everybody watches the movies. In a series, takes a little bit of hit. Video games are next. I would say books are next, and comics, I hate to say it, are kind of like at the as far as people consumption wise, there's probably maybe 5% I would maybe assume that like reads the comics religiously every week, I should say.
Mhm.
So it's really nice to be able to
Yeah.
have a place where I could actually speak to somebody
There
that
you go.
actually is reading these things on a weekly basis and getting excited about.
I mean, I mean, for the last year and a half, we've been just DMing on Facebook Messenger just about these things every Wednesday whenever we read them. And all that to say, the synopsis from this morning is linked in the description below. The recap, if you want to give that a look over on the Starrapter channel. And yeah, and we're gonna dive in right now. We're gonna get to a bit of comics from from my partner in crime here, Joel Davis. Not quite. I would never
Yeah,
presume that, Joel. Would never
we're
presume that.
hijacking. We're hijacking the Star Wars Underworld.
This
We
is
got the
again,
prime time spot now. We got it.
we got it for this week, and I don't know, maybe next week. I don't know. We'll see. gotta take advantage while it's here. No, I'm just kidding. We gotta have our own spot. We deserve our own spot. It'll be good. Yeah, I mean that's one last thing to say is the comics industry and the weekly single issue thing. I mean, the it is going the way of the dinosaur. That is true. Most folks, at the very least, prefer to read trades or collected editions or the full-on omnibus, which I understand, and I totally get that. And so stores are pivoting, brick and mortar stores especially are pivoting towards that. Shout out to variant edition graphic novels and comics in Edmonton for leading the charge to that.
Yeah.
But we're still going to do the single issues, the Wednesday pull single issues, and then figure out when we're going to podcast
Yeah.
about it. But yeah,
Yeah, I'd be remiss to kind of preamble this whole discussion as this is kind of like the rebooted version of Tractor Beam
Mhm.
of if you guys are within drivable or commutable distance to a local comic book store, go ahead, support them, do your best to get into those brick and mortar stores because as Matthew said, it's a dying breed, but there's something, I don't know, Matthew, what your place is like, but there's something
Mhm.
magical about a comic book store and a safe haven
Mhm.
for people to go into every week. And I don't know about you, but like I show up to my store like around the time they open, like 11, between 11 and 12, I show
Mhm.
up there. They open at 11, and there's always at least 5 or 6 people in there.
Yeah.
And every time I go to the register to get rung up by Dale, the guy that's always there, there's always a conversation that me and him
Mhm.
are having, and there's either a conversation with the guy in front of me, like everybody. It's just so fun to go to a place. It's almost like the Comic Con feel or the Star
Yeah.
Wars Celebration feel, where you go to the place and we're talking about the who's this person on the cover? I'm explaining to him who Byron Valence is. I'm explaining to
Mhm.
him who Tonga is and all these characters from Bounty Hunters. And we're talking about the Disney Plus series. And so I just find it so nice to go
Mhm.
to a place like that. It's like it's my weekly ritual. Like I'm fortunate enough that my place is on the way. And it's Comic Relief in Lawrenceville, New Jersey. I'm lucky enough that place is on my commute to work. Like it's
Mhm.
halfway there. I just pull over, get my comics, and go right to work. And I get there a little early before work so I can just read them. I'm fortunate to have this nice little plan that I can do. I can get all this done before work,
There we go.
and then I'm good to go for when I get home and I record. But
Mhm.
yeah, it's just it's great to have a place to go to. I know it's so easy to be able to just download it. It's great for the people that aren't close to a comic book store
Mhm.
that they can enjoy the fun with digital issues and they can get them at like midnight or whenever they release. But yeah, basically, long story short, I just wanted to talk about the value of a
Yeah.
place where you can physically go to, have great socialization with people who are there for the same thing. And just, it's amazing. Like going into a comic book store, it, even if it is a dying industry, maybe, I don't know, but just the wide breadth of the releases from Marvel, DC, IDW,
Mhm.
like the entire wall every week. It's just like,
Yeah.
I used to pick up the Flash comics every week, and that stopped a couple years ago because then they started releasing them twice a month, and I was like, oh, on top of
Little
Star
much.
Wars, I can't keep track of
Yeah.
the money. And that's another thing. It
Yeah.
can be a little bit more expensive now, especially when we have an event like we're talking about where you do need every one of those pieces to kind of continue the story. But yeah, I just want to make sure I addressed all that.
Yeah, yeah, that's fair. My new store, 'cause I recently moved. My new store, CQ, did on Queen Street in Toronto. Yeah, just getting into single issue pulls now, so good to support them. Yeah, the watering hole feel back up in Cyber City, north part of Toronto, where I used to go. Definitely got conversations going. Yeah, the watering hole. I mean, the people are always the most important. We're this weird niche, a niche within a niche among Star Wars fans, but the common human thing of gathering together and something we love, something we appreciate, something we enjoy. There's something common, something relatable to folks outside who stumble across this YouTube channel. Anyway, on that note, should we dive in, shall we? There we
Sure
go.
thing. Let's do it.
All right. Dark Droids, #1, written by Charles Soule, art by Luke Ross, cover by Leinil Francis Yu. Scourge of the Droids, there's that cover by Leinil Yu. Scourge of the Droids, a Star Wars epic like you've never seen before. Who or what is the Scourge, and why is no droid safe? As the corruption spreads from one droid to the next, the rebellion and the Empire face chaos. What role does Ajax Sigma play in all this? And whose side is he on? Find out when horror comes to a galaxy far, far away. Charles Soule continues his legendary run on Star Wars with the most ambitious event in Star Wars comics history. Joined by his War of the Bounty Hunters collaborator Luke Ross, the superstar team carves a new path for the future. That is a mouthful, but it's deserved for for a comic that really was a perfect setup for this new phase, new era, new chapter in this little pocket between Empire and Return of the Jedi. That I was really struck by. It could have been more mechanistic. It could have been, there's the danger of it becoming more. This is kind of what's happening and what's going on, and it's a droid, so we usually circuits and wiring and relying on that. And I was really struck, especially that first, I think it's the first double spread, no, the first panel,
Yeah.
first page with the thing in the question mark, and you're in dark in the quote boxes, and you're just drawn in.
Yeah.
Definitely. And then really playing up the horror treatment of it. You have the great, I call them montages. It's weird to call it in comic books montages, but the
Yeah.
the scenes of just Imperial officers are just dead, just lying on the
Oh
bulkhead,
my
just
gosh.
gone. And you can, like, the aftermath of some real creepy violent thing that's come through.
Mhm.
But a few surprises. I mean, first of all, I was not surprised. I was surprised at just how connected this is to the Crimson Saga. I mean, I
Yes.
always wondered, and when this was announced, I wondered, why are we doing this now? Why aren't we making a beeline to Return of the Jedi?
Mhm.
Why are we having this gap? And
Yeah.
that still remains to be seen. We still need to know what this is setting up, because unfortunately, fortunately for canon, everything in this time period has to be hurtling towards the Battle of Endor and the second Death Star and Luke and Vader. And so that I think they did a great job by including Mon Mothma and the plans, and how 3PO is somehow being taken over by the Spark Eternal. And the Spark Eternal fused with this ancient thing in the what's it called,
Fermata cage.
the Fermata cage. Like, who saw that coming?
I know.
Nobody did. And then the last big surprise is with Ajax Sigma, who of course is teased in the what's it called, the Revelations one shot by Mark
Mm-hmm.
Guggenheim, brought in through the Han Solo comic by Mark Guggenheim, this High Republic era droid who apparently led a revolt, led a droid revolt, but
Mm-hmm.
now is, and so I thought he was going to be the antagonist. I thought he was going to be,
Same.
like, whatever, like this whole preview. What role does he play on this? Whose side is he on? Turns out he's on his own new weird corner of the galaxy where there's these benevolent droids who believe in
Mm-hmm.
liberation. And this is going to be the real interesting philosophical point. I'm curious to see how it plays out. Both the protagonist Ajax Sigma and the antagonist, the Spark Eternal thing,
Mm-hmm.
believe in droid liberation, just have vastly different understandings of what liberation is for.
Oh
And
yeah.
I love the way Charles Soule is going to explore that. And of course, credit to Luke Ross for with the montages and the
Mm.
whole black page with the question mark and everything. Anyway, I just spoke a lot. What did you think of Dark Droids #1? How did it kick off? And yeah, what surprised you?
Yeah. Thanks for that. You summed up a lot of my thoughts already, but I'll try to throw in some other thoughts
Yeah.
here along the way. But yeah, I mean, preconceived thoughts before getting into this was like, again, like, oh, do we need another crossover? Oh, does it have to be between Empire Return of the Jedi? Like, I thought we were getting to the end, and so I already had negative thoughts going, and I was like, oh, here's another Marvel crossover. Like, hopefully, it's better than Screaming Citadel or whatever. Right? Like, oh, here we go, another
Yeah.
horror theme crossover. We haven't seen this before. Um, but by the end of it, I was like, I'm really on board. I think this
Mhm.
is great. I think the creatives team between Luke Ross and Charles Soule is amazing. I pulled up the article on StarWars.com where influences of exact panels were pulled from horror masterpieces like Frankenstein, A Thing, and the Evil Dead series. And I totally get it because you look at those, and I said this on Twitter, just one of the things I like the most about is perspective of this.
Mm.
Seeing from the perspective of the droid eyes and
Yes.
seeing the first person view of them looking at humans and the hunger and all this. Like, I thought that was so cool. I've read the book twice now, and there's little like nuanced things like that are like I feel it's almost like a double issue. It's a huge issue.
Mhm.
It's a 5.99 issue, and they really packed a lot. Charles Soule really packed a lot into this thing. There's so many little details you can pick apart. I I was a little bit trepidatious. I'm like, oh wow,
Mm.
like you said, I'm very surprised that they didn't really start like a new page and was separated from more of the bounty hunters in the Kira trilogy.
Mhm.
But in fact, I had to go home and pick up my issue Hidden Empire #5 and be like, where did that disc from
Right.
come from? Like, I remember like the spirit going into that of the Spark Eternal, but where exactly did that come from? So I did like a whole breakdown of that when I was talking about my on the podcast or
Mm.
on my video for the recap of like, oh yeah, so that
Mhm.
thing was what the Fermata cage was holding, this dark droid, and now that it's bonded with the Spark Eternal, it's like the worst kind of thing that could happen because Spark Eternal is crazy as it is, and
Yep.
now it's connected with this droid that wants hunger, and they're kind of one unit now. So I like that aspect of like, oh, this is it's not a Sith, it's not a dark side user,
Mhm.
but it's just as powerful, if not more, because we're seeing the devastation that this thing is able to cause. A Star Destroyer of 47,000
Right.
organics completely killed within minutes, it seems like, and able to spread around. Like, the way I look at this is basically the Star Wars version of The Walking Dead, but with
Mhm.
droids. Like, the
Yes.
droids are all susceptible to this virus. And it
Yeah.
is, as we see with the end, as you said, with C3PO, it's like, oh my gosh. And then Ajax Sigma, I was like, oh my gosh, this guy's gonna be the big bad, big bad. We open up and it's like the exact wording of the place he's in is something like something of the second revelation. I thought of you
Yeah.
instantly as somebody
Of
that's
course.
I was like, oh my gosh, he's gonna love this,
Yep.
It's so bizarre, and they're ritualing putting somebody together, and then they have these crusaders or something. Oh, one of our crusaders on the Star Destroyer was killed and sent out the
Right.
signal. And it's like, it reminds me, as you put it, like, okay, they both they both want droid liberation, whether it be the Scourge or it be Ajax Sigma's crew. But then it kind of reminds me of the great Netflix series Daredevil. In season 2, you have Frank Castle and you have Matt Murdock discussing how they both want to get rid of criminals, but Punisher wants to kill them. Daredevil is trying to just get them in jail and incapacitate them. So this is kind of the same thing in that regard. It's like, okay, you got these two different kind of thought processes. They're trying to do the same thing, but in different ways. And how is that going to work? And there's just so much. But I will say too, finally finish up my overall thoughts, is just like the ramifications of this is huge, and that's why we're connecting to Bounty Hunters, Dr. Aphra, Darth Vader, and Star Wars, is because and the D Squad miniseries, is because this is going to go throughout the galaxy. I don't know what kind of effect it's going to leave on the galaxy. I think it might have something to do with the Death Star plans, because at one point, and it's very creepy scene, because apparently they're like, the droids are like a hive mind through the Scourge. So like one will talk and then they'll continue their statement coming from a vocabulator of another droid like 30 feet away, and they're like, "Ooh, we have everything in the Empire, everything they could even want." And Palpatine can't even connect some of this information because he's not a supercomputer like I am. So it's like kind of scary. It's like, oh my gosh, like they have access to literally everything. Like what does that even mean? So it's pretty crazy how much ramifications this can have.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting, how with Palpatine, his Luke says your arrogance is your weakness, and he doesn't deny it. But his oversight, his inability to actually see what he has in front of him, because all he sees is his hatred of the Jedi. It's interesting we bringing up the Sith, and you brought up how the Spark Eternal isn't Sith, it isn't Dark Side, but it is Ascendant, and that's the funny thing, the interesting thing about the Ascendant is, they try to mimic Sith actions using magnets and electricity and all this weird, whatever, kind of goofy stuff, but interesting stuff. And it turns out they're also mimicking their mindset and their thought process. Whereas, you see Ajax Sigma and his smaller group with this High Republic design, High Republic Art Deco aesthetic, kind of having at least the ideal of what the Jedi ought to be. What freedom and justice ought to be about. So yeah, I mean it's almost to say, I wonder if part of what Charles Soule is saying, or at least saying in universe, is this is the droids connecting to the Force in their own way. At least because at least having moral agency in their own way, because in Star Wars they do. So it's interesting. You have 3PO and R2 are the heroes, the droid heroes. So if you have any last thoughts on Dark Droids before we move on?
Oh yeah, certainly. I can talk about this for an hour, but I know we have more stuff to get to, and we're gonna try to keep this within an hour. But I like the idea of, I haven't seen this much importance and attention given to droids in a long time, and it better have been, right? It's called Dark Droids, right?
Yeah.
But I love that another montage they have in the beginning of, it's like, all right, the droids and what they mean to people. You got droids like friends, like R2 with Luke. You got droids that are just meant to be destroyed, like Darth Vader. You got droids that are meant to just build houses. You got droids that are brains of ships that apparently somebody was in love with at a point.
Lando and L3, we knew that. Come on.
Yeah. So I liked how it set up the perspective. Charles Soule was able to set up that perspective, and here's how everybody is close to these droids, and things could be very devastating if things get a little bit out of hand. So it's interesting there.
Again, devastating, but also salvific, like the saving, because in Star Wars, relationships, friendships are what save the galaxy. So it's very Disney, but that's why Disney was a perfect fit. It's the friends you meet along the way. All right. Hyperspace Stories, number 7, written by Michael Morrissey, art by Andrea Moody, direct edition cover by Tom Fowler. The name strikes fear across the galaxy. The most skilled and ruthless bounty hunter alive, who always gets his prey, But on the planet Ridley, Fett finds a job unlike any he's taken in his long career. But other bounty hunters have taken notice, and soon the Mandalorian finds himself defending himself and his client from Bosk and his gang of ruthless Trandoshan hunters. Chris, I'll turn it to you. What do you think of Hyperspace Stories number 7?
I really enjoyed it a lot, Matthew. I think I'm enjoying Hyperspace Stories a little bit more than I enjoyed Star Wars Adventures by IDW. I think they are very smart, the writers on board with this, with creating something that's all ages, but that can appeal to the older audience like us. It doesn't feel as kiddish all the time. And I mean, come on, how can you not like a badass issue with Boba Fett just kicking butt and taking names? Like it, I love the art on this, by the way, too. I thought the artwork looked a little bit more like in the Marvel vein with like how gritty Boba Fett looked and stuff. And it's cool. Like they like I told you in a chat too, private chat, about how the connection between Boba and the Wookiee and about that father and son or father and daughter relationship and how that's important, and how heirlooms of people that you respect and are related to are such a big important thing. And even though they're looking for something as trivial as a doll, that is a lot more, because there's memories attached to that. There's lots of different things that are emotional, compare like that are embedded into this doll. So they ended they show the wonderful flashback of Boba as a kid picking up Django's helmet in the Petricani arena on Geonosis and all that good stuff. And so I like how the story went deeper, and even like you see like a softer side to Boba Fett that we don't really see, like, because it's hardened bounty hunter in this issue. He's taking on 6 Trandoshans at the same time, and he's using his flamethrower, everything in his arsenal to take these guys down. But at the end of the day, he's dropping this guy off of Coruscant, this little Wookiee, and basically just giving her good advice about you got to keep trying, don't give up. It's out there, keep looking for it. And there's just great action from Slave One. I appreciate them just showcasing off the fire spray model because it's awesome. And there's even a little nod to Shadows of the Empire when you can see that Boba Fett's remotely using that thing in the boss fight as your Dash Rendar, and Boba Fett's even flying outside of the ship while the ship's firing it. It's like, yes, there's some good old Slave One action in this one.
Any story that gives Boba Fett a little bit more of a heart, that peels back the layers, like the first 2 episodes of Book of Boba Fett. I'll say that. I don't know about the rest of the series, but the first 2 episodes really peel back the layers and show and add depth to the character. Even that Mandalorian episode on Tython. This one, I mean, to see how his father's death still affects him, thankfully in ways that aren't so violent or destructive, to actually go and help this kid who's lost this doll. And it, like you said, we could see that as some kind of silly nothing, but it's not. We got this extra thing, but that's from her father. That's all she has left. This interesting weird through line through these hyperspace stories of this kid Wookiee and this doll and what's happening with that. And I'm kind of a way for kids, I think, to connect into the story as well. I mean, even the way for kids in us to connect to the kid in Boba Fett who kind of died in that arena. I mean, you see in Clone Wars how he's trying to push his way through, be hardcore and just be a bounty hunter, and he doesn't really know what he's doing. And whoever else, Aura Singh takes him under his wing, and under a wing, and it just to see how protective he can be. And then I thought the funny nod, when you said Dash Rendar, my mind went oddly enough to how he too gets confused for Han Solo and Chewbacca. There's like this Wookiee, this bounty hunter smuggler and this Wookiee are wanted. Oh, it's not Han and Chewie, it's Boba and this kid. Which I thought was another strange choice. Interestingly, to put a on Coruscant, would that make her safer? Which I guess in the Underworld maybe not so much in the Imperial Palace with this library, but I guess on Coruscant might be might be safer in lower levels. I don't know, but there's always, I'm always surprised at how there's a little more to hyperspace stories than, it's kind of the way a kid's show, or I mean, it's not necessarily a kid's comic. It's more like a young teenager's comic, but
Yeah.
it's kind of like the way those shows also have stuff for the parents to sink their
Mhm.
teeth into too. So yeah, I mean, again, it kind of pales compared to the other two comics that came out this week for me, but I definitely appreciated being what it is, and being a bounty hunter comic. I'm kind of it's not always my jam, but um, yeah, I appreciate again peeling back the layers and showing his character under the helmet, what could lead Boba Fett to do the kinds of things he will do with the Tuscans later on.
Yeah, and one final thought about Hyperspace Stories is the fact that they have room to cover any character they want as long
Mhm.
as it ties back to a doll. You just got to put that
Yeah, there
doll in the corner of a frame. You're good to go,
we go. Mhm.
basically. Um, but it's nice to have always that Star Wars story to go to. And yeah, you're right. When a week that I get Dark Droids and Yoda number 10, I'm gonna be reading Hyperspace Stories first. I always read
Yeah,
the stuff that I'm like least looking forward to first, like save the best for last.
yeah,
So like that'll always be the first thing I read that week. But then every time I start reading, I'm like, but the books are never bad. Like
yeah.
I always enjoying by the end of it. I'm like, yeah, why would I
Mhm,
like not be waiting for this? Like this is like
mhm.
really fun. And the fact that we're able to jump from Ray one issue, go to Boba Fett another issue, go to Greedo another issue, like that's fun and that's all Star Wars and it's all a good time. I don't know.
Yeah, well, so I was a little bit behind, so I just was reading I read the Greedo issue yesterday earlier, just catching up. And like that one, I mean, I don't think that's a kid's one at all. That's
Yeah.
this he has this crush on the singer and does everything for her, and then she just up and leaves and bails on him and Jabba. Um, but showing the backstory of how Greedo got in with Jabba after
Yep.
being the kind of the patsy in the Han Solo comic a little bit. But yeah, this one, yeah, not too bad. Yeah, and then next week I think it's a Kylo Ren story. So,
Wait, we're getting one next week already?
or not next week, next month, next issue,
I was gonna
whatever that
say they
is.
did
Sorry,
two in a week,
no, no. Although I mean, I
in
do
2
think
weeks.
the release schedule has been weird. I do think there's
I
something
feel
with
like
Dark Horse. Yeah,
Dark Horse doesn't have the organization or the structure to run two comic Star Wars series at the same time for some reason. Because it was like
no,
as
no.
soon as like they hadn't released an issue of Hyperspace Stories in about 4 or 5 months, and as soon as High Republic stuff was done,
Mhm.
they're like pushing the stuff like quickly out. I feel like it's like, all
Yeah,
right, let's get
kind of
this
compress
out.
it.
They can
Yeah.
only focus on one thing at a time. I don't know. But there's supposed to be 12 issues. We're more than halfway through.
Mhm.
I'm very curious to see if they're gonna just rebrand after issue 12 and do like Hyperspace Stories Volume 2 or something like
Yeah,
that. Or just
yeah.
make something long term. I would like to see them do a non Star Wars. I still do Star Wars Adventures, but then have an additional series that's
Yeah,
like because the High Republic adventure stories are so good.
yeah,
And it's like that serialized long-term storytelling. Like
mhm,
give us a book like that with like a character from the prequels, sequels, or original trilogy or something like that. That'd be really cool.
yeah. All I ask is just don't worry about the framing device. It's fine. You don't need a framing story.
Yeah.
I think kids can follow along. I mean, if you want, fine. But that's the one knock I had on Star Wars Adventures. There was always this framing story, and like, okay,
People but remember how important that was. Remember how important
yeah,
that framing device was
oh sure,
because that was Milo Graff, who is the descendant
right,
of the Graffs who are very important in the High Republic, and they're
mhm,
like one of the antagonist factions of the High Republic. So if it wasn't for them, if it wasn't for Kevin Scott making those Fear of the Galaxy novels or whatever they were called, then
yeah,
yeah, that's a big part of High Republic that we wouldn't have. So
that is true. That's so. Speaking of Power Republic, definitely saved the best for last. Yoda number 10. Written by Calvin Scott, art by Ibrahim Robertson, cover by Phil Noto. I know I say High Republic. There's Obi-Wan and Dooku on the cover there. Anyway, the final lesson. After years in exile on Dagobah, legendary Jedi Master Yoda is visited by a ghost of his past. Plagued by painful memories, he must enter the cave of evil to face his ultimate fear. But will the Jedi's greatest teacher recall the most important lesson of all? And my voice is dropping in weight and sadness. This is one of instantly one of the greatest Star Wars comics I've ever read. I'm gonna put that out there right now. Most emotionally impactful. I'll say that. Most emotionally impactful because uh yeah, I mean exploring, I mean it's Kevin Scott picking up the threads that he's been exploring so well in Dooku Jedi Lost, and um looking back on how, Yoda reflecting on Dagobah, the failures of the Jedi under his watch, uh he let the Sidious rise from the Empire and wipe out his family and wipe out his Jedi Order, and it kind of is his fault a little bit. It's not, it's Palpatine's fault, it's the dark side's fault, but Yoda has to take all this time reflecting on his responsibility, and that is what he carries into the cave with him. And you know it was just so beautiful, meaningful, yeah, to see Obi-Wan being insistent and saying, there's actually more, there's something better around the corner. And I'll get to that, talking about that in a second. But uh that's what his exile has been about, and I've thought about that for a while, to see it reflected in a story that the whole point of his exile on Dagobah is to reflect on the failure that led to Order 66, the failures, the series, the sequence, the trajectory. That he probably thinks now, I should have known better. Um, it's stunning, and this comic is so stunning because, first of all, it's stunning because I got to name her Keeve Trennis. This is me on a Star Wars Underworld YouTube channel talking about Keeve Trennis, because this is what I do every single week. I was already super, like, to the max level 10 intrigued. What on earth happens to her? What the heck happens to her? Why does she leave the Order? And I have my theory about how the Order just is at the end of phase 3, or whenever this is, whenever that is, has retreated to the temple, is not willing to actually step out and be the defenders of peace and justice in the galaxy, and she wants to go and act on behalf of the vulnerable and the weak, and the Jedi just won't, for their own fear and interest, and fear of the nameless and the leveler, and everything with with Markion, and with that guy over there. You can point the mask. We're using the Ion Cannon branding, by the way. We're just because we haven't figured out. We'll get Tractor rebranding. So anyway, that's all. That's all. I'm still talking about this. Keep showing us. But then she, like, her whatever apparition is going on in the cave there, she appears alongside Dooku, the 19th and the 20th fallen master, departed master. The two busts in this room here, signifying the cautionary tale. What why have the Jedi failed these wizened leaders who have given so much to the Order? With Dooku, yeah, we see, yeah, he was kind of going after his own little empire there, and he falls to the dark side. Keeve, there's no sense that she falls to the dark side. She just felt abandoned by Yoda. She was trying to stick up for what's right, I think, and he let her down, and he didn't come and help her out. And so, that he carries that weight of that failure. He carries the weight of two fallen masters under his watch, one of whom is clearly fallen to the Sith and dark side. Kind of, one of them is clearly probably a lot like the Spark Eternal, and taking freedom into violence. And one, I think, for Keeve, wanted to pursue freedom for the sake of helping the galaxy, and Yoda failed both of them. So here, that's the one reason it's stunning. But the second reason it's stunning is, not only does Keeve trying to show up, but that is not the most impactful moment in the comic for me. He one-ups it one more time, reflecting on, what does this all mean? How can this be a spark of hope for the galaxy? And I'm glad I have this mug right here. Pass on what you have learned. My favorite line, one of my favorite lines in all of Star Wars, my favorite moments in all of Star Wars, is Yoda and Luke on Octo. And to bring that quote back, the greatest teacher failure is one of my favorite lines in all of Star Wars. And when I read it, not expecting it, I felt this whiff of wind come at me. I'm not kidding. And it could have actually been a breeze, but I felt this just like, oh wow, he's finally landed there and finally recognizes the wisdom of he's 900 years old and it's taken him this long. A lesson he had learned a couple centuries before from this kid. But yeah, the great teacher of failures. I have started to well up reading a comic precisely once, and it was yesterday. And Kevin Scott, I somehow broke me. I immediately, I sometimes, I don't know. You do this with you the creatives you really appreciate. You send them a message or send them on Twitter saying, yeah, this was fantastic. Give them their support. Um, yeah, this was I'm sure I have plenty more to say about this, but uh I don't quite know what more to say. It was to see that pivotal moment for Yoda, um, knowing 30 some odd years later what pivotal moment that has for the galaxy. It, and just the I mean the turning point, even for even a number of months later. I remember how many days later, weeks later it'll have for the galaxy, as Luke shows up right at just after this comic. And so, or yeah, a few months later or whatever. um yeah, way to finish, way to actually, uh we thought Dark Droids was going to be the headliner of this week, but no, Yoda number 10. Everyone needs to read this comic book. All right, I'm done talking about that for now.
No, that's great, Matthew. Hearing when somebody says like, "Oh, this is their favorite Star Wars story of this medium," or
Yeah,
in general, it's just like,
I mean
"Oh,
there are other
wow."
ones I probably love. I mean, like Vader 25, Soul Vader 25, Soul
Mhm.
Vader, or Gillen Vader 25. This is up there.
Yeah, that's amazing to find those stories that you can really latch with. And yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed this story too. I think this is a great way of ending a series, maxi series of 10 issues, and
Mhm,
going back to Kevin Scott's run of the first 3 issues with Bree and those other villagers, and harkening back, even bringing back the instrument. I love it when a story has time to close well. We come across these in TV series,
mhm,
any medium, where like some of the stories they feel like they tie the bow off a little bit too soon, too quickly. You're just like, oh well, that should have been a better ending. I feel like this ending was
mhm,
built up to this organic point, and like you said, it actually transpires and kind of goes into the future,
mhm.
and a great ideology from Yoda, and the idea of him going to the cave.
Yeah.
So that we've seen Luke do, we've seen Kylo Ren destroy the cave on Dagobah at
Right.
one point, but to see what Yoda would see, and the first thing that struck me was, oh my gosh, he finds out that Yaddle gets killed by
Right.
Count Dooku.
Yes.
Like
That
that
moment.
image, that's where it began, and then after that point, it was like just page after page of just like Anakin, some other characters. I think I seen Bail Organa and Mace Windu in
Yeah,
there somewhere.
yeah.
So it was very, very impactful, and it was great that like he learns that lesson after the adventures with the villagers,
Mhm,
after Count Dooku and the tiger alien, after the Clone Wars. Like he's had all these experiences, and now
mhm,
he's able to learn from these mistakes he's made, and it ties into with him saying yes. I love the ending where it's like, yes, I am ready to teach and I'm ready to learn, or something
mhm,
of that degree, where it's like, yeah, he's old, and they were talking about that in the beginning of the issue, like he's old but he could still learn things at 900 years old
mhm.
you know
Yeah. I mean, it kind of interesting, tying back to, is it, I think it's not the Jason Aaron, it's the Kieran Gillen. No, it's Jason Aaron. Wait, the one where we have Yoda with the mountain people. Um, how he goes to this
Jason
planet.
Aaron.
Yeah,
Yep.
it's a Jason Aaron
Yep.
comic of the ongoing, and
Yep.
Luke was reading these journals, Obi-Wan's journals about Yoda, and how uh, he's still able to learn. I mean, that's interesting, right? We accuse Yoda, and I just said it is his fault. Well, he was still teachable. He's still able to be curious about the galaxy. I mean, we see that in the Clone Wars season 6 arc, where he's still able to explore and be open and embrace the darkness without embracing the dark side, um, and whatnot. I mean, it almost just underscores just how far gone the Jedi were at that point. That not even Master Yoda could be innocent of this. That he was so part of the system that was, I mean, part of the main plan and the architects of doom for the Jedi. Uh, you know, he still couldn't help but fail. I guess he could have, but the patterns of thought and the patterns of belief that lead people lead leaders even into especially leaders, I think, into problematic situations. Um, you know, having the time to finally reflect on it. Yeah, it also ties into two different stories in this from a certain point of view. Um, I think the New Hope certain point of view where he's debating with Obi-Wan
Hmm.
about Luke and like, no, yeah, Skywalker, yeah, she's coming, right? Leia's coming, right? That one, and so that this is that final no, yeah, I'm ready to actually train Luke there. Also, there is I think is the Empire Strikes Back Pakpov, where with the cave and how it's from the cave's perspective, really interesting,
Oh
and
yeah.
how the cave is all about wanting to teach Yoda a lesson, and Yoda is able to master it, and then teach Luke this lesson, and the cave is actually a servant of the light side in a way. It's using the dark side, but the dark side
Yeah.
can only in the end be a servant of the light because there is nothing but the servants of but the light, right? The Force itself is the light, and
Hmm.
I mean, kind of my George Lucas perspective there. Uh, yeah, and so fine again to see this in this comic come, all those things come together. I mean, those I don't think Kevin Scott wrote either of those stories, but
Hmm.
yeah, or I mean, definitely Jason Aaron wrote the
Oh yeah, I
Kevin
don't
Smith
know who
story,
did
but yeah,
the I don't know who did the novel
yeah,
short
I'll look that.
stories now.
But yeah, I'll probably have more to say. I'll probably have more to say next week. Who knows?
Yeah.
But I don't know if you have any last thoughts on Yoda number 10.
Yeah, I just remember this being announced at Celebration Anaheim. I
Was
think
that
we were
Anaheim?
probably both sitting next to each other in that publishing panel, and
Yeah,
we're like,
probably.
"Oh yeah,
Yeah.
Kevin Scott was there. We're gonna
Mhm.
get
Yeah.
Mark Guggenheim. We're gonna get Jodie Hauser all on board."
Mhm.
And it seems like that was so long ago,
Yeah.
and it's just finished. I'm like, dude, that was over a year ago.
May 2022. I mean, that makes sense, right? 10 issues, 10 months, more than 10 months.
Yeah,
Well, those
and
it would have been. Anyway, yeah, well, that's a good question. What do you think of this run as a whole?
I like the structure, and as I
Mhm.
said in my review, it's like nice to have a character that's so long lived as
Yeah.
Yoda because you're able to see the galaxy in different ways, see how he behaves in different ways. I really
Mhm.
liked seeing him working alongside Anakin Skywalker, taking down the
Yeah.
Mega Droid, the Separatist facility. I
Yes.
really enjoyed seeing him dueling with Dooku as he was a Jedi, and like
Mhm.
he's discussing with Dooku to like train these younglings, and
Mhm.
yeah, I like how it was able to jump around a lot. The artwork was fantastic all the
Mhm.
way through. It's amazing these these artists what they're able to do with Yoda's likeness. I mean, he's
Yeah.
not easy to draw, not easy to color. And some of those panels looks like you just took a photograph of him off of the Empire Strikes Back stage, soundstage or something. I just really like seeing all those images, and I think it's a good model to have. I think it's a really good model to have going
Mhm.
forward for some of our new or some of our legacy characters. Like, hey, let's get a 10 issue maxi series on some other characters around the
Yeah.
galaxy. Like, this is a good method. I know
Mhm.
we had the Age of Resistance, Age of Rebellion
Yes.
before, so yeah, let's get another maxi series out on another influential Star Wars character.
Mhm. I mean, you mentioned Age of Republic by Jodie Hauser, one of my favorite runs. I mean, this definitely her books definitely have the feel of that. Uh, during the Clone Wars, right? I think she did the
Mhm.
Clone Wars era one, right? I
Yeah,
mean, I got
yeah.
this prequels T-shirt in case anyone's wondering.
Eh,
So I mean, yeah, it really dove in to how again the pivotal nature of this character. Even the High Republic era ones were, I mean, they didn't have the High Republic banner because it doesn't, I mean, it doesn't really necessarily connect and doesn't quite matter too much, but um yeah, to see that era tie into, I mean, with Kiev especially, but also with Bree, and the lesson of that time. I mean, yeah, I was just realizing that, where's Yoda? Where's he kind of hiding? I mean, and we know he was off of the younglings, teaching younglings, but he was also on this planet learning himself. So,
Mm,
yeah, I agree. Definitely a great concept going forward, and it was really well executed. A great concept to say, what is a pivotal moment in a character's life, and how might that have led to it in terms of how that affects kind of the Skywalker adjacent. We got that for Obi-Wan Kenobi in a different medium. We're getting that with you got that with Yoda in this medium. So yeah.
mhm.
I don't know if you have anything else to say or to follow up, but
Yeah, no, I just again, I like the idea also about splitting it off between
yeah.
different writers. I think that's pretty cool to get like,
Hmm.
Cavan's thoughts on it, to get Jody's thoughts on it, to get um I just blanked
Yeah.
on his name.
Look this up. I got the internet right here. Uh
Mark
Mark
Guggenheim. Mark
Guggenheim. Yeah, Mark
Guggenheim.
Guggenheim. Yeah.
Yeah, to get all those, to get all them to be on there, to be able to
Mhm.
interspace a story. Let's get Team Yoda to do something
Yeah.
else now with them.
Yeah. I mean, three well honed, tried and tested authors. So there we go. I mean, the next thing is Charles Soule's Palpatine book. Give that 10 issue series. Why not?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, who knows? Let's see that get announced sometime. Anyway, on that note, I think it's good time to wrap up. I'll do this for the plugs here for now. So the Ion Cannon podcast uh, is our your home on the Star Wars Underworld Network for in the discussion on the lore, the High Republic, the galaxy far, far away. We do focus on novels and comics, especially. We're Joel and I Monday nights, 9 p.m. Eastern. No, 8 p.m. Eastern. 8:30 p.m. We're moving times. 8:30 p.m.
Uh-huh.
Eastern, 5:30 Pacific. Yeah, that's right. Starting back up on August 21st. You can follow us, right here on the Star Wars Underworld YouTube channel, under Iron Cannon Twitch, Iron Cannon Twitter, Underworld Twitter, Underworld Facebook when that gets working. Yeah, and then follow Iron Cannon Pod, all those socials, all the fun stuff, threads as well on Twitter. Chris, where can they find you on the internet?
Yeah, they can find me on Twitter, twitter.com/Starrapter. And my main thing you're going to see me on is YouTube, youtube.com/Starrapter. As Matthew said, I put out those comic book reviews every Thursday morning. I have been full of reviews when it comes to full book reviews on the channel.
Yes.
I had recently reviewed Inquisitor Rise of the Red Blade. Fantastic book. Got to pick that one up.
Yeah, I
I
do.
I picked up where I got it sent to me from Disney Lucasfilm Press. I got sent to me High Republic Tales of Light and Life
Mhm.
and the Kira novel Crimson Climb.
Nice.
Both of them I can easily recommend. So we are in a really good stretch between now and I'm sure that Fact Pod Return of the Jedi is going to be great
Yeah,
with those 40 authors of
looks
40 stories.
fantastic.
So from now until October, you guys are going to be eating well when it comes to Star Wars on the page and the longer format of
Right.
books, because everything is at least an 8 or a 9 out of 10 in my eyes, what I've read so far.
Yeah, that's great to hear. I admit I love High Republic so much. I'm behind. I'm halfway through Cataclysm, so got to finish before Phase 3 starts because Phase 3 starting right around the corner. But yeah, we are keeping our eye on Canon. EYEONCANONPOD. Yeah, check us out back on the 21st, and yeah, check out Outer Rim Transmissions as well over on Starrapter YouTube channel.
Mhm.
But for that, it's I don't know. I need to find a good sign off because I got for the Iron Cannon blowing something. I don't know. Let's see you next time.